You've seen it happen. Two people locked in a heated argument, voices rising, faces tense. Each one convinced they are right, each one desperate to prove the other wrong. And yet, despite all the shouting, nothing changes. No one backs down. No one walks away with a new perspective. The debate continues endlessly, like a cycle that can never be broken. But what if I told you that this is not a sign of intelligence, but of weakness? Schopenhauer understood something that most people never realize. Arguing is rarely about truth. It's about ego. People don't argue to discover what's right. They argue to defend their pride, to avoid admitting they were wrong, to feel like they have won, even when they haven't. And the moment you engage in this game, you have already lost. The truly powerful do not waste time in debates. They do not try to convince those who refuse to listen. They understand that the strongest position is not to fight, but to control the conversation without ever needing to argue at all. In this video, we will break down why arguing makes you weak, why the powerful refuse to engage in it, and most importantly, how you can dominate any discussion without ever raising your voice. Let's begin. Most people believe that arguing is a battle of logic, a way to prove a point through reason and evidence. If that were true, then the smartest and most rational arguments would always win. But that rarely happens. People don't argue to seek the truth. They argue to protect their beliefs, their ego, and their identity. Schopenhauer understood this deeply. When people engage in debate, they are not searching for answers. They are defending their worldview. If their beliefs are challenged, it feels like a personal attack. Admitting they were wrong is not just an intellectual defeat. It feels like a loss of self-respect. That's why people rarely change their minds, no matter how strong the opposing argument may be. Modern psychology confirms what Schopenhauer suspected. People suffer from confirmation bias, meaning they instinctively reject information that contradicts their existing beliefs. They do not evaluate arguments objectively. Instead, they seek validation for what they already think. When presented with facts that challenge their worldview, their brain triggers cognitive dissonance, a state of discomfort that makes them cling to their original position even harder. This is why debates are often frustrating and unproductive. Once emotions take control, logic is irrelevant. Schopenhauer also saw that those who rely on argumentation are often the ones without real power. The strongest individuals, leaders, strategists, and successful people rarely waste time in debates. Instead, they control the conversation without engaging in direct confrontation. They use silence, redirection, and persuasion instead of conflict. Rather than arguing, they shape the discussion in their favor. History is filled with examples of powerful individuals who understood this principle. The most influential leaders do not win by debating. They win by setting the terms of the discussion. They do not seek to prove others wrong. They ensure that arguments never become necessary in the first place. Schopenhauer recognized that those who engage in endless debate are playing a losing game, not because they lack intelligence, but because they fail to see the deeper truth. Argumentation is rarely about what is right. It is about dominance, and the truly powerful do not argue. They control. Schopenhauer understood that argumentation is not just a battle of ideas. It is a battle of psychology. Most people believe that debates are about proving who is right, but in reality, they are about control. When emotions rise, logic fades. Those who argue emotionally reveal their weaknesses, while those who remain composed gain the upper hand. The first rule of psychological warfare and arguments is to recognize when you are being pulled into a trap. Many people start debates not to seek truth, but to provoke a reaction. They push buttons, make inflammatory statements, or create situations where their opponent feels compelled to defend themselves. The moment you react emotionally, you have lost control. The key is to remain detached, refusing to give your opponent the emotional satisfaction they seek. Another psychological tactic is mirroring your opponent's energy, but in a controlled way. If someone is being aggressive, responding with equal aggression often escalates the conflict. Instead, matching their energy in a subtle, controlled manner can unsettle them. If they speak quickly, slow down. If they try to dominate the conversation, use strategic silence. This forces them to adjust to your pace, shifting the power dynamic in your favor. Reframing the discussion is another powerful tool. When someone presents a challenge, they often set the terms of the debate in a way that benefits them. Instead of engaging on their terms, reframe the conversation. Politicians and powerful leaders do this constantly. If asked a hostile question, they rarely answer directly. Instead, they shift the focus, making the debate about something else, something they can control. One of the most devastating psychological techniques is agreeing with your opponent in a way that neutralizes their attack. This disarms them, leaving them with nothing to fight against. For example, if someone accuses you of being too confident, responding with, "I understand why you'd think that." Confidence can sometimes come across that way, removes the confrontation. Instead of resisting, you absorb their statement, making further argument pointless. Schopenhauer also recognized that people fear uncertainty more than they fear being wrong. If you challenge someone's beliefs too directly, they will defend them instinctively. But if you plant subtle doubts instead of outright opposition, their mind will begin to work against them. Instead of saying, "You're wrong," say, "That's an interesting point. I used to think that too, but then I found something surprising." This creates an internal conflict in their mind without triggering a defensive response. The truly powerful understand that debates are rarely won through force. They are won through subtle psychological control. Instead of arguing, they guide the conversation. Instead of reacting, they remain composed. They do not fight battles that do not need to be fought, and in doing so, they dominate without resistance. Schopenhauer believed that those who engage in constant debate are already at a disadvantage. They waste time and energy trying to convince others when, in reality, most people do not change their minds through argument. The truly powerful do not seek to win debates, they seek to control conversations before arguments even begin. Instead of trying to prove a point, they make others see the world on their terms. One of the most powerful tools in avoiding unnecessary debate is silence. Most people feel uncomfortable with silence, especially during disagreements. When confronted, they rush to fill the gap, often over-explaining themselves or exposing weaknesses in their reasoning. A well-placed pause forces the other person to keep talking, revealing their emotional investment while you remain composed and in control. Those who master silence create an air of authority, making their words more impactful when they finally choose to speak. Another essential strategy is redirection. Instead of engaging directly with a challenge, shift the focus to something more favorable. Politicians and business leaders use this constantly. When asked a difficult question, they do not argue, they acknowledge the question briefly, then guide the conversation toward a point they are more comfortable with. By controlling the direction of the discussion, they prevent arguments before they start. The ability to ask the right questions is another way to dominate without debating. Instead of making a direct statement, frame your response as a question that forces the other person to rethink their position. This subtle psychological trick makes them feel as if they arrived at a new understanding on their own, rather than being forced into submission. When people feel that they are in control of their own beliefs, they are far less resistant to change. Schopenhauer also emphasized the power of storytelling over logical argumentation. People do not connect with raw facts as much as they connect with stories. If you want to shift someone's perspective, give them an example they can emotionally relate to. Instead of stating that a policy is flawed, tell a real story about someone who was harmed by it. Instead of proving why a decision is right, illustrate its success through an example. The most persuasive individuals in history were not those with the best arguments, but those who could craft the most compelling narratives. Understanding when to walk away is also crucial. Many people fall into the trap of believing that every challenge must be met head-on. In reality, the most powerful individuals choose their battles wisely. They do not argue for the sake of it. If a discussion is leading nowhere or if winning serves no real purpose, they simply disengage. Walking away is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that you control your own time and energy. Schopenhauer understood that true power lies not in winning arguments, but in avoiding them altogether. Those who argue reveal their need for validation. Those who control the conversation have already won before a single word is spoken. Schopenhauer understood that arguments are rarely won through logic. He knew that debate is a battle of perception, not truth. In his work, The Art of Being Right, he exposed how people use deception, misdirection, and psychological tricks to appear correct, even when they are wrong. The goal is not to seek truth, but to manipulate the outcome. One of the most common tactics is distraction. When someone feels they are losing a debate, they will often shift the conversation to a different topic, avoiding direct engagement. Instead of addressing the original argument, they create a diversion, making it harder to stay focused on the key issue. Another common trick is the personal attack. When someone cannot refute a point logically, They attack the person making the argument, shifting the attention away from the discussion and onto their opponent's character or credibility. Schopenhauer saw how these tactics were used in politics, business, and society. He realized that many debates are not about the strength of an argument, but about controlling the perception of strength. The one who appears more confident, composed, and dominant is often seen as the winner, regardless of the validity of their claims. Those who hold real power understand this well. They do not engage in arguments because they know that debates are often just a performance. Instead of playing the game, they control it. They use strategic silence to unsettle their opponents, allowing the other person to speak more and expose their own weaknesses. They choose their words carefully, speaking less but commanding more attention. And when challenged, they do not react emotionally. They shift the conversation in a way that benefits them. Consider how successful CEOs handle difficult questions in interviews. Instead of debating, they redirect. Instead of defending, they reframe the discussion to their advantage. They do not waste energy arguing. They focus on influence. Schopenhauer recognized that the truly powerful do not engage in pointless disputes. They do not seek to prove others wrong. They ensure that the debate itself never becomes necessary. Those who rely on argumentation believe they are proving their intelligence. In reality, they are revealing their weakness. The ones who understand this rule do not argue, they dominate. Schopenhauer revealed a truth that few people are willing to accept. Arguing is often a waste of time, a trap designed to keep you distracted, emotional, and weak. The strongest individuals do not engage in pointless debates. They do not seek to prove others wrong. Instead, they shape the conversation, influence perception, and control the outcome before the argument even begins. If you find yourself constantly needing to defend your ideas, ask yourself, why? Are you truly changing minds, or are you simply feeding into a cycle of resistance? The truth is, most people will never admit they are wrong, no matter how strong your argument is. Their ego is too deeply attached to their beliefs. Once you understand this, you begin to see that debating is not about intelligence, it is about dominance. And the person who controls the discussion without arguing holds the real power. Silence, redirection, and strategic disengagement are the tools of those who understand this game. The most powerful people in history, from great leaders to master strategists, have always known that the best way to win is to avoid unnecessary battles. Instead of proving themselves, they let their presence, actions, and words carry the weight of authority. They do not fight to be heard. They ensure that when they speak, others listen. So the next time someone challenges you, trying to pull you into a debate, remember, you do not have to engage. You do not have to prove anything. Let them argue. Let them exhaust themselves in trying to convince you. And when they finally stop, you will still be standing, untouched, unshaken, and in control. Schopenhauer knew that power is not in proving a point. It is in being so unshakable that no one dares to challenge you in the first place. If this video changed the way you see arguments, imagine what else you might be missing. If you want to learn more about power, strategy, and philosophy, subscribe to the channel and join us as we uncover the hidden rules of the world, the ones they don't want you to know.